Hey, I'm Alex Radical from Board Game Co, and today I'm reviewing Kathmandu from Stefan Feld and Queen Games. Kathmandu is a 2 to 4 player race game, although it's more of a point salad game that happens to have racing as one of the various many ways you can earn points in this game. You see, in this game, you are going on a journey from, well, where you start over here, all the way along these boards into Kathmandu. The game comes with 8 boards. There is a short game and a long game. I do recommend the long game, honestly. It's not that long. It's a little better. But the long game uses all 8 boards, and the short game uses 6 boards, so you get a little less done along the journey. I like getting more things done in games, which is why I prefer the long game. But past my own personal preference, which we'll get into the review as well, what are you actually doing along this journey? Because I mentioned already, it's a race, but not really. And so let's touch upon that first. You're going to be getting points when you get from here all the way to Kathmandu. So over here we have these point tiles, which are worth 15, 11, and then 8, and then 6. They go increasingly down in points as you go through the pile, which means the first person to get to the end will get points, and if you don't get to the end at all, well, you won't get those points, and you may even lose some points for exhaustion in the game. So you do kind of want to get to the end, although getting there first is more of a question of just where are you getting your points from and what various things are going to give you point alternatives along the way. Which, I guess speaking of which, is let's get into all the various things that will give you points, because that will help you understand what it is you're doing as you go through the journey. So, first and foremost over here, you're going to get the points for this over here. You're going to get points for various goods you pick up along at these bazaars on the journey. You also get points for kind of being the owner of a certain type of good. We'll explain that more, but there are these bonus tiles that will be worth extra points as you go. There's also going to be set collection. Getting 5 or 6 of the different good types will give you a chunk of points as well. You will lose points for not having gotten close enough to Kathmandu. These barriers over here, for each of these barriers you haven't crossed, you will lose an increasing number of points. If you never make your way off the first tile, you'll be losing a very large chunk of points. That will not happen. You're gonna make your way close to Kathmandu. Honestly, the question is more whether you end up like here, here, or here, but you are going to be going along this journey. Along the way, you'll have an opportunity to visit these various temples, dropping off your tokens onto those temples, and these will be worth an increasing number of points. For example, if you manage to drop off all over these over here, you'll get 35 points. The last 2 you can only do in the longer game, but you're gonna get 35 points for having dropped those off along the way. You're going to have various terrain types you're trying to visit. So for example, over here, you have these terrain types. You're going to be, well, these terrain type tiles, this gives you a goal. Right now, as the red player, I want to land on a green spot, and when I do so, I'll be able to flip the next tile over here and continue going through this yak pile and the procedural goals it gives me as far as the different terrain types to land on. Now, depending on how many tiles you get through, you'll either lose points for having not gotten far enough into the pile, or if you manage to do all of them, you'll get 10 points. You're also going to get points for map tiles. You have these map tiles over here. You start the game with some, and you're going to be getting an opportunity to get others whenever you visit those temples with these over here. And so getting collections of map tiles will be worth points. You get points for the map tiles on their own, but you get more points for a set of A and B, and you get even more points for a set of the same color of A and B that is also protected by a treasure chest, which is one of the various many item cards you can have in the game to help you on your journey. So again, you get points for those map tiles, more depending on matching, and more depending on matching plus locked on a treasure chest tile. You're also going to be getting points for painting animals. There's going to be animals that will come out in each of the rounds. There's 6 rounds in the short game over here. This animal card over here, they're going to come out with 1 animal per round. Strictly speaking, by the way, it's 6 days, and each day has 3 rounds, if you want to think of it that way. But you're going to have the opportunity to paint animals. And getting animals, this one's a little more complicated, but the value of each animal you paint is equal to the difference between the person who paints the most animals and the least animals. So for example, in a 2-player game, if one person paints 4 animals, one person paints 1 animal, then the difference is going to be 3, and so each animal is worth 3 points. So it really helps if you heavily focus on getting all the animals, you can get a nice chunk of points, versus if you're just kind of all keeping pace, you're keeping the scoreboard even. You'll also get points for having extra cards and cards over here and resources. So extra resources and extra cards will give you points that you did not use at the end of the game, and you're also going to lose points for exhaustion markers, which are these over here. A variety of things can give you exhaustion markers, but whenever you do something that takes an exhaustion marker, you'll either have the chance to clear them out during the game, or you'll clear them when you get to Kathmandu, or you will receive -3 points per marker. I think I've covered everything. I could be wrong, but I think I've covered all the various things you're going to be getting points for as you go through it, which means now let's talk about the turn structure. But as you've seen, there's just a lot of ways to get points. The question is, what are you focusing on? Sure, you can be the first person to Kathmandu and get 15 points. Also, you can get all your tiles over here, all these little tributes on the various temples, and get 35 points. So it's really a determination as to what you think you can get done and what is the best combination of things to get done, as opposed to any one aspect, particularly just that race on its own. So On a turn, what you're going to do is you're going to roll a bunch of dice. So we're going to roll some dice over here. We have these dice. This is my dice roll for the turn. And again, I'm going to be using 3 of these dice. Those are the 3 rounds across that first day. So 6 days, 3 dice per round. That's the cycle of the game, using 18 dice across the whole game. We'll take a die. So for example, over here, maybe I want to go on green, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'll take this purple die. I'll put it into my slot. I will get a purple good. That's the first thing you're going to do. At this point, if you're exhausted, if you have 3 exhaustion markers, your turn is done. You clear those exhaustion markers. You've got rid of them, but you also lost a turn. Hopefully that won't happen. Definitely won't happen the first turn, which means move to the next step, which is to remove that many pips. So for example, I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm going to land on green, which is, well, I guess before I show that, that's where I want to go on this. So I go ahead and mark that, and I flip this, I've landed on green. Now that I've done that, there are a number of different things I can do depending on where I am. If I'm in a bazaar, I can buy goods. And if I buy a good, what I get to do is I get to spend 2 coins. Coin is one of the 5 resources. I spend 2 coins. Well, I spend 1 coin to buy a good, and I can spend 1 additional coin to take the master good of the same type. The tricky part is you can take it from the supply, and then boom, look at that, I have 7 points. Or you can take it from another player, giving them the coin and denying them the 7 points. Which means going last on these goods, getting the last opportunity to get a particular type of good, is a nice way to swing the score by a nice chunk of points. So you want to be mindful of which goods are later on the journey to think through what the order of the right goods to take is. Like right now, looking at this over here, all of these show up later, so I need to be mindful of that. But the later we get in the journey, there might be your last opportunity to get something. This spot over here is the only place to get this one, so being the last person here might guarantee you that you get that good for the rest of the game. That's going to be the bazaar aspect over here. Landing on a temple is going to, like I said already, let you put one of these onto the temple, and then also taking one of the map tiles from the supply. Landing on a particular terrain tile will give you the opportunity to paint an animal and or acquire a good, so an equipment. So for example, if I landed on a temple right now, I can go ahead and paint this animal. Whereas since I landed on a forest, I can give up a backpack in order to take this, and this I can use at any point on my turn. I put it into my store of equipment that's available. I don't have to use it right now, and this will let me flip one of these whenever it's helpful to do so. So for example, if I had passed this spot over here and I didn't want to go backwards, it might be in my benefit to try to move past the water because the next water is over here. There'll be times you want to use that, and you can use this equipment for that. But again, there are a lot of equipments doing different things. This one will let you get 3 different goods over here to be used for whatever you want. This one will let you move from one terrain all the way to whatever you want within that terrain. So for example, if I'm over here, I can use this to move all the way over to here because you just pick any one terrain type and move as far as you want within that one terrain type. This one will let you put a piece on a temple while being adjacent to it instead of on it, which means on this turn I can do multiple things because I can do whatever it is I wanted in the game in general, but I can also, maybe I can paint an animal or get an equipment, but I can also put a piece on that terrain by cashing in this card. There are a lot of different equipments in the game. They will all give you a different way to break the rules, and they're all very fun. Painting an animal requires giving up a paint set. Again, so we have 3 goods covered, buying various elements from the bazaar, getting an equipment, and using a paint set to go ahead and paint an animal. And we've covered already, those are going to be worth points in the game. And depending on the player count, only 1 or 2 are out every single day. So in a 2-player game, you're going to have one animal out the entire game, whereas at higher player counts, you'll have 2 out, which means, 1 animal per day, which means 6 the whole game, and a higher player counts, you'll have 2 per day or 12 per game, and again, more in the longer game, obviously. The longer game, that's where you can really have as many as 24, 8 times 2, 16 different animals throughout the game, which can lead to massive jumps in the point scoring, especially if somebody didn't go for animals. That's where you get a lot of opportunity over there. The last 2 goods over here are used for 2 different things. We have this over here, which is used to feed your ox when you pass one of these barriers. If you don't have that, you can still pass, but then when you do so, you'll gain an exhaustion marker. Similarly, it's something worth noting is the value on the die is a mandatory amount. You have to move that much. You cannot move less, and you cannot turn. It is a straight line moving that much. Whenever you would break that, for example, if you would move 5 forward when you're over here and you go 1, 2 and you stop, you take an exhaustion marker, so you want to be mindful of that. So there's going to be different ways that you're going to gain exhaustion markers for not being able to utilize the die properly. Past that, I covered all that. What am I looking for? Past that, the compass marker. This one over here, this compass is used when you are going in the direction of this compass marker over here. So for example, it's not relevant on this board, not relevant on this board over here, it'll be relevant. When we cross over here, if I start going this way, so if I go this way over here, looking at that arrow, I am moving in the direction of the arrow. When you do that, you have to pay a compass to the supply or take an exhaustion marker. So again, it's something that gets in the way of your puzzle, trying to figure out what it is you're trying to do. Are you trying to skip movement? How are you trying to avoid avoid these particular situations because those exhaustion markers will add up and restrict you from being able to do things. That is basically most of what is happening in the game. Across 6 days, you're going to have 3 rounds in each day. Each round has you drafting a die. When you draft a die, you take the die, you get the good, you move that many spaces in a straight line, and then when you move there, you get to take a different number of opportunities depending on the spot that you're landing on. Those opportunities will involve getting equipment, involve painting animals, involve buying goods from the bazaar, and involve going to temples to lay off your stuff, while also being mindful of trying to fulfill your yak tile as you go, trying to gather these combinations of map elements, and then possibly being the first one to Kathmandu, although again, that is but one element in the entire game. The last thing to cover over here is going to, well, I guess there's a few things to cover. The one more thing is going to be this mark over here. At the end of each round, you're going to go ahead and flip one of these and see if it's a day or a storm. If it's a day, nothing happens. If it's a storm, the storm will advance, and if you are behind the storm, you will again get an exhaustion marker. So it does give you a little pressure. It's not essential. You could avoid taking those. You could take those exhaustion markers and still be fine, but it is something that adds a little bit more pressure to trying to at least advance closer to Kathmandu. And then lastly, there's the modules. There's going to be 2 modules in the game. There's going to be the tense module, which is kind of a take that element in the game. It just gives you an opportunity to give exhaustion markers to other players in a way that I don't play with this module. It's not particularly fun. It just adds take that. We'll get that into the review. And then the element of the module I do use every single time is going to be the character module. Character module will give you character abilities. It'll give you different starting goods and a character ability. For example, this character can cross mountains, which other players cannot cross mountains unless you have the relevant equipment that lets you do so. And he can all the time, or is it she, he? I think it's a she. I can't honestly... I'm not sure, it might be whoever it is, crossing the mountains over there will give you opportunity to cross mountain, breaking a rule, and that's true for all the characters in the game. And with that, that is how you play Kathmandu. There's also the longer game, which is a full 8 rounds and 8 map tiles, giving you more opportunities to get stuff done. And with that, let's go ahead and dive into my review of what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking, starting off with what I like. Which in general is, this is a Stefan Feld point salad game. I like that genre of game, and the fact that you are considering different things and how to get your points in this game makes the game compelling. You might think of it as a race game at first, which is natural. There is a final destination to get to, and so you kind of want to go there, but also it's only a small chunk of points relative to the vast pool of points you can get in this game, and so in general, it's just one element amongst many. You do want to consider the cost of the storm, the cost of being tiles behind, the cost of not getting those tiles at all, or possibly even getting penalized for your exhaustion markers. All of those go into the math of you figuring out, where can I get the most points? Can I go to every single temple? I mean, this one's really out of the way. Do I want to go there? Is it worth it? What about these over here? Like, the rest kind of I can work my way through it, but do I have enough time to visit every temple, to get those map tiles? Do I have those treasure chest cards that are going to give me more points for those map modules? There's a lot of things in this game, but learning not to race is part of the puzzle. You have to learn not to race unless it is advantageous to do so. You do want to be moving forward towards Kathmandu, but there's a lot of benefits to staying back. Even just the fact that you have an easier opportunity to steal these tiles the further behind you are, because you get kind of last dibs on things, because the alternative is forcing a player to buy multiple of the same thing to deny you the opportunity to steal, and that usually won't work in their favor because they're giving up the points they get for the set collection element of getting all the different goods of that type. And so there's a lot of things to consider as you go through it, as well as a ton of ways to break the rules with the equipment. The equipment, there's going to be a whole bunch of different equipment, and you're going to be gathering as much as possible in order to break all the possible rules, in order to do anything that the game doesn't let you do, in order to get rid of exhaustion markers, to move twice the value of a die, to curve based to turn when you otherwise can't turn. The pool of equipment, you start with 2 from the starting equipment pile, and then after that you can go ahead and buy equipment whenever you land in the matching terrain. And then trying to puzzle that up, trying to match that up with your yak tile as well. It just gives you a lot of different things to consider as you try to figure out, how do I combine it all in order to get to the end destination, in order to get as many points as possible, in order to hopefully just outplay the other players through the point salad aspect of the game. The longer game, I think, is a better version of the game. It just gives you, again, the game isn't that long in general. I think the shorter game comes in at under an hour almost always. I'd say probably even 45 minutes once you know what you're doing. And the longer game is probably, again, it depends. First game, long game might be 90 minutes, but once you know what's going on, you can probably get it down to like in just a little over an hour, maybe 70, 75 minutes for the longer game. And again, player count also matters, the players at the table also matters, but again, the longer game is not that long relative to the more you get to do, the longer race. Setting up your own pass, by the way, is fun as well. The game does give you a recommended setup if you want, but alternatively, you can just set things up using a little bit of just like trying to force a little bit of interesting decisions as you create the tiles, and then making a path that is going to allow other players to replay the same exact game, but with different path constrictions that change the way you play through that. The character expansion, I will always play with. I have no clue if the characters are balanced or not. Can't speak to that at all, but the characters are fun to play with because they give you, the players, an extra ability to utilize at no cost to the actual gameplay. So if you just want extra fun stuff to do in the game, the character expansion is an easy add. As far as things I don't like, let's go directly to the tents expansion. The take that element in this game, of which there are two elements primarily. There's going to be the tents expansion, which I will never play with again. It just adds take that to the game. It doesn't make the experience better. I would never play with the tents expansion again. But then also even the stealing of these. In a game that's otherwise so focused on your own engine and what you're doing, the fact that you can steal these tiles from other players is a high element of take that doesn't feel like it fits into the rest of the game. It does add to the strategic choices you're making, but it feels like we have this game where it's all but your little point salad engine, and then boom, straight in the middle, boom, you lost 7 points. And that can be a huge difference. If you're playing a 3 or 4 player, in a 2-player game, it's almost not as bad because everything 2 players directly me versus you, that's fine. In a 3 or 4 player game, you can absolutely lose the game because Joe stole from you again. Joe stole that tile from you, and you're like, you would have won, but Joe took it from you. Joe didn't even win. It can introduce a high elements of Kingmaker because of how many points it's worth. And again, if it swings it so that Joe wins, I can at least mentally reconcile that that was fine. But half the time, it won't at a higher player count. And so the take that just felt out of place with the game. Past that, overall, it definitely is on the lighter side as far as Stefan Feld games go. It definitely has. It has the point salad that he's known for. It does work well, but I definitely felt this was lighter compared to the interweaving elements that he has in his other games, and that just comes down to personal preference. That will make that a little bit more accessible for you, but it might make it, well, not might, for me, it makes it a little less compelling than some of the more meatier games that he has. And then lastly, at lower player counts, not a problem at higher player counts, especially not in the longer game, but at lower player counts, if you're playing a 2-player game at the shorter, if you're playing a 2-player shorter map play game, if you're playing a 2-player game with the shorter map, there's only 6 animals the whole game, which really lends the animals to just not being as satisfying to engage with and just less point scoring coming from them in that particular element. Again, it's not as much of an issue at higher player counts or the longer game, but it is an issue at lower player counts and the shorter game. As far as what I can see others not liking, first of all, dice rolls. There is some degree of dice mitigation. In fact, I forgot to tell you, but you could give up a die, returning it to your board in order to re-roll the rest of your dice at any point. Well, not at any point, once per round, once per day. So that does give you a little dice mitigation, but dice mitigation or not, you can still get bad rolls and you can re-roll your dice and still get bad rolls. So if you don't like that aspect that you are tied to your roll, this game does have that, which is very Stefan Feld to force you as the player to try to work with whatever the game gives you, but not everyone enjoys that. Similarly, on a very similar note, the yak tile over here is going to force you into different choices, and if you don't want to play by this, you will potentially lose a lot of points, so you kind of have to a certain extent, but again, if it doesn't fit in with the rest of your strategy, similar to the dice, it is one of those things that you as a player have to be willing to react to that and appreciate that challenge, or it's just a frustration. And then lastly, the pressure of it being a race game. For me, I like the fact that it's a race game, but not really. It's just one more thing to consider. But for you, the pressure of it being a race game, but also not a race, that dichotomy over there may not work for you as you play through the experience. As far as final thoughts on Kathmandu from Stefan Feld over here, I overall enjoy Kathmandu. My biggest issues with it is that it is on the lighter side, which makes it slightly less compelling than his other games, and then they take that element that kind of feels out of place in it. The animals is very particular to particular player count and shorter games, so not as much of an issue, but overall, it still is an enjoyable experience. It's a game where you can do a lot of things for a lot of points. It's a game where you do want to get more done. It's a game that once you play that first short game, you're going to want to play that longer game. Well, I can't say for sure if you do. I want to play that longer game right after to just do the exact same puzzle, but with more done. It feels very Feld-like, while possibly being primed towards Feld-like players who want a slightly lighter experience. For me, I definitely enjoy this, but that lighter experience does hold back a little bit. It's a 3.5 out of 5. As far as other game recommendations, this game felt very reminiscent of Creature Caravans, particularly in the sense that it is a race game that is not actually a race game. It has that going for it, and Creature Caravans gives you a lot of point salad things to do based on the cards you're going to acquire throughout the game. And the other element is this entire map structure, the different map tiles you can set up and the different boards you can set up as a different challenge, that felt very reminiscent to the Quest for El Dorado, a game I definitely recommend checking out from Reina Knizia that gives you a deck building actual race game. That one is full on a race game. The only thing that matters is being the first one to the end, and definitely check that out if you want a game like this that very much is about the race. In any case, then, until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you found this review helpful, and as always, I hope you have a good one.